These have got bite marks in them. It was back when I was like first started recording her, trying to do like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Out of it when you were trying to record her?
No, well, yes and no. She got used to it, and then when I wasn't there, she just thought, this looks tasty. So what I've got on the speaker stands behind me is the Cali Audio LP8s. LP8s as opposed to LP6s, which are the 6-inch woofers. These are the 8-inch woofers. Okay, before we start, I'll edit this into the beginning. So before we start, I actually have to tell you how I got these, because I didn't pay for them at full retail. I did buy them, I did pay money, but I didn't pay anywhere near full retail, because I contacted Cali Audio, because basically, they're a new company. I'd never heard of them before, but I started seeing them pop up on retail websites. And at the price point and the way they were talking about it, I was like, okay, could potentially be good or could be rubbish. Like, let me do some research. The reason I did get them, though, ultimately, is because at that price, I figured if I don't like them or they don't really suit what I'm doing, I can at least use them as like a backup pair or put them in the living room as a stereo set. So it wasn't really much of a loss because I wanted to replace those speakers down there anyway. They've been on these speaker stands in here for about 4 months. So their design is an 8-inch woofer, as I said, and the top tweeter is soft dome. So the sound is a bit more relaxed, a little bit less intensive, and you're less likely to get ear fatigue as you listen to them over a period of time because you're not being exposed to such high energy in the upper ranges. But interestingly, it doesn't mean they're less detailed. Ultimately, what it means is there's less of maybe an emphasis on those high-end details, but you still hear them. And then around the tweeter, if you look, it's kind of like inside a crater. That's the waveguide, and that's designed and calculated in a specific way to disperse the sound frequencies outward, so that if you imagine you're sitting dead on in front of the tweeter, or your ear is lined up to it, or if you move a little bit, if there's no proper dispersion, what it will end up happening is as you move, you're not going to hear it the same way because you're in a different line of fire. You don't end up hearing it. It doesn't end up sounding strange if you just move your head around a little bit, or you move, or especially if somebody else is sitting with you as well. So you both have this wider soundscape. Now the other thing it does too is it provides a very nice wide soundstage. So when you listen to stereo material on these, it sounds large. You can hear things that are spread, and you can also hear where things are panned very easily. So that's the basic design. You can see they've got a massive hole in the front. That's the port. I actually think because that hole is so big, it actually reduces the air pressure coming out of there. So when you turn these up, you're not getting like a gust of air pressure in your face. Basically, they use the port to kind of extend the low-end range of the speaker, but for other reasons too. Some manufacturers use it to kind of artificially give a bit more low-end energy. And then if it's used well, there's a really nice equilibrium where the port and the woofer can work together to deliver like a strong, realistic, natural kind of bass. I think the main thing they have going for them, especially over the Atoms, is they're larger. So the cabinet and the woofer, it has a more natural bass extension down to the low end. So it's got deeper frequencies that it can produce. Now, because of that, it doesn't have to try too hard to like create extra energy down there. And especially though, in sort of the low mid range, you kind of have like your bass, and then you have where your kicks live, and then you have where your subs live, which is below that. And what's really nice here is you can really hear the different region of where the kick lives and then where the subs live underneath it. So I'm very impressed. Actually, I wasn't really expecting all that much. They didn't just kind of meet my expectations for where a $500 speaker should sit. They go quite a bit beyond that. But anyway, they're not as... So where you would want more is perhaps something with more powerful amps in there that can just put out more energy generally. They're not at all quiet. I mean, you've heard them. They're loud, but they're not at all getting up to that range where they're almost like a PA speaker. Like, I don't know if you ever remember when we went to the store and listened to the Barefoots, which was the ones with the big white cones. I mean, those are really powerful. And they have big beefy amps in them for those woofers, and they're also like $4,500 a pair. So these are nothing like as strong as what those were. Although there is one other thing about them that bugs me a little bit, and that's their noise. It's a gentle white noise. It's not as obvious now with my computer on because a computer fan is on there, but because when I'm using them, I'm not always mixing audio. I'm doing sound design, so I'm spending quite a bit of time working on stuff, but I don't necessarily have audio playing through them all the time. So I'm in the quiet a lot, so I can hear that noise more than if somebody was working on actual music all the time. I mean, it's not excessive. It's not, you can hear, it's not stupidly loud. It's just enough to where you start thinking, is some of my equipment making some noise here, or have I got something turned up that shouldn't be? But it's actually just a speaker. It's self noise, and all speakers have self noise to some extent. There are some that if you put your ear up to them, you can barely hear it, and then there's these which you can kind of just quite easily hear the noise if your room's quiet. But the thing about it is, I've tested it. It doesn't get louder when you turn them up. So if you go on the back and you turn up the gain, that noise doesn't change. If you turn them right down, that noise doesn't change. It's some kind of always there level, and that's just the way they are. If they ever made a version 2, it'd be great if they could fix that, beef up the power maybe a little bit more, maybe make the cabinet out of something a little nicer perhaps. I mean, the cabinet's fine, but the plastic on the front is very cheap feeling. Obviously it doesn't matter to me anymore now that I've got them up and running and I use them, but when I very first took them out of the box, they looked and felt a little cheap, especially the plastic. If you put your hand in the woofer and you feel that plastic, it's really quite thin, more than you'd really expect. But once you start, for me anyway, once I started using them, it just didn't matter.
So somebody shopping, taking a look, trying to figure out whether to get this version that you have or the price point below it.
Oh, the 6s?
Is there, what would be the clincher for them?
When you mix music, let's say you're mixing music, if you're somebody who's always like focused on the hi-hats, the snare, and the vocal, and that region, and you just find the bass region pretty easily, like, yeah, here's some kicks and bass and whatever, then the 6 inches will probably be great. But I haven't heard them, but just generally speaking, smaller speakers are fine for all your mid and your high-end stuff, and then larger speakers when you want to hear more of that low-end energy. That's it really. They have a bunch of features too, which are interesting. They have a bunch of switches on the back. So these have a digital element in there that can change the response of the speaker depending on if you sit it on a desk. Because if you sit it on a desk, the way you're going to hear it changes. So they have built-in switches to help like fit it to your environment. So if you're sitting on a desk or near the wall or a foot away from the wall or on a speaker stand, so that helps a lot because it means you can tailor it to whatever room you're in. So that's actually a pretty good idea, instead of just giving you bass and treble controls. So very impressive. There's really aren't any more features other than that. They're pretty basic. I've heard enough low-end speakers or speakers in this price range to know that these are worth listening to.